A part of life is making choices. We tend to do so based upon what we like and not like, and not liking what we don't like, or on thinking which of two ways is better, or on deciding what is good for us, or on rejecting what is bad. However, sometimes we don't have a choice, even if we wish we did, for we find ourselves having to do what we don't want to do. When there is something that we must do, choosing seldom enters the equation, necessity seeming to have more power to move us than being good or bad. Another problem in choosing is that we put what we want first without considering what others need. This is especially true if someone else is doing something that we don't like. An example of this is road rage. The person expressing it having gotten angry at another person's driving. Even arguing between two persons often takes place because both sides assume that they must be right, and so that the other must be wrong. A sentence starting with, "Well, what I think is," could end up not being taken well if what is personally thought of as right or wrong is actually a way for us to support our self-interest. And thinking that we need to take care of ourselves before anything else, we find ourselves paying attention to our likes and dislikes as if our survival depended on it. In our putting ourselves first, we may not notice the negative effect of not getting what we want or getting what we don't want. The way to deal with this is to give up relying on such a confining belief in self. This is what we are doing in period after period of Zazen. By not getting involved in the Sisyphean task of trying to change our untrustworthy self by means of that same self. Not understanding that our self is not who we are, but only who we think we are, we suffer in listening to the demands of the self and choosing what we think favors it. Shakyamuni Buddha explained that why we suffer is because even though everything changes, we act as if it isn't true for us personally. Much like kids quickly licking the ice cream in a cone before it gets a chance to melt, we try to get living right in our life by continuing to choose what we like until everything is as we want it to be. However, we cannot control that things change, and are trying to do so despite this. We are not living in reality as it is. And thinking that we are is as futile as a child wishing the tide wouldn't wash his or her sandcastle away. Watching it wash away could even be a part of playing, but we adults tend to hope our castles will last forever and may use our sand to make concrete. Someone with a conservative bent may be against change on principle and desire to revert to how things were in the past, as if change hadn't taken place back then as well. All this is not to say that having preferences need result in our suffering. Nothing is intrinsically wrong with liking or disliking things. Some may enjoy having strawberries in their daily granola, like I do, but their desire for strawberries would only be a problem if it was felt that the strawberries couldn't be done without. Then such persons would suffer from not getting what they want. If their understanding was that if they had strawberries, and if they didn't, they didn't, that would be accepting life as it is. Desiring to have what is good and not what is bad doesn't have to be a problem either, unless we are concerned with being unable to accept the way things are, but think that we have to give in to reality. Such as when thinking that one has to grin and bear something or grit one's teeth over it. Forcing ourselves to do things is a form of coercion carried out by the self. And accepting things as they are is not to be attached in that way. Even if one has not given up fighting change, not having to come to accept the way things are yet, this could be practiced by taking "don't be attached to things" as if it were an 11th precept. Stating it positively, this would become "be open to everything." Encouraged by this, we would be practicing recognizing the true nature of things. No precept should be taken as law that we need to obey, but as a way to protect ourselves and others. Once the precepts recommend us not to do become in time what we naturally don't do, they will represent reality, and we won't have further need for them. Thank you. Here's Jane.
Hi.
Okay. Anybody have a question or comment? Yes, Chris?
Just a thought, when you were talking about the strawberries and the granola, other than that's very delicious, just in general, it's like when we revert to our 2-year-old self and we have something we want, our desires are foiled.
Yeah.
How it doesn't matter what age we are, when we have an experience like that where we're completely in our own self-centered mentality, our world, how it does feel like the entire world is over. It feels like the universe is entirely against us, and it just struck me how funny it is that this small self can be such a huge distraction from the truth of things, vis-a-vis the big self, and how when we can forget the small self, there's nothing so terrible that can make us feel like the universe is going to end immediately, but that the universe is just against us, because it is us.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it does begin at that place, like you said, Chris. It begins, but me, or give me for children, and of course they do begin to cry when they don't get it, or bawl actually maybe when they don't get it. Yeah, and we are just repeating that thing that we learned when we were long time ago. And so but it's all based upon the small self, and as was mentioned, thinking that we are that. It's thinking that we are that is the problem, because we are. That isn't us. Chris is not. Well, Chris is the small self. Peter is the small self, and Peter is the big self, and Chris is the big self. Okay, but we are all together, but we get it mixed up, and we have the small self being the boss and needing to be the boss, and then it causes a lot of trouble for us.
Can you say something about how the small self sort of asserts itself? And because sometimes it does feel like, or sometimes I hear it talked about as if it's an entity, it's a being of its own. How true is that?
Well, it actually when it no longer matters that you don't get what you want in practice, okay, which happens, and so whatever there is, there's no problem. It's not a very, it's not something that's very very important anymore. It just loses. It's like the balloon. It just loses its helium and just gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and then it's gone. And so we call that forgetting the self, but in fact, it's not even forgetting it. It just no longer matters, and that's a very important part of practice. Very, very important part. But that happens to all of us. But of course, it takes some time. Yes, Jane.
Oh, I just wanted to add that I think the self is almost a separate entity that lives and grows on its own. But it's like in this world, as we think, so it is, and as we think, we create. And so the self grows out of our imagination. We think this and we really start to believe it. And so it truly does become a self, a separate being from who we actually really are. But it's like we think, I would like armor, and armor is what we get. So we have to be careful about how we think, among other things. And parents, teach children when they get frustrated at having something, if they're aware, they teach the child how to graciously accept not being thrown by not having something. Anyway.
Does the helpfulness of Zazen then more or less come from Zazen being, among other things, a continuous exercise in denial of that self? Is that what sort of helps deflate it?
Not denial, no, because if I'll let Jane answer this after you.
Oh, actually, this is
Because that's actually you were talking to Jane, but I jumped in a little quick.
You answered.
Okay, because what I read in Mel's book recently, of course, is that when you accept yourself completely, so it's the opposite. When you accept yourself completely, that's enlightenment.
The small self.
But that self, isn't, it's not that greedy, needy, not rather greedy, needy self. It's not that self, but even that's a part of you, and you accept it. So you don't deny it. But you, I think in Zazen, when we're just sitting without thinking, or thinking taking place that we're not paying attention to. So in that case, we kind of learn, well, really, that's not so important, without trying to learn it. But we just, Zazen just says, don't worry about it. It'll happen. But it's also, it's also very important, of course, to recognize who we are as our practice advances, and we have to deal with it. That's also a very important part of practice. And so we kind of learn more and more that we learn more and more the extent to which we suffer because of it. And to a certain extent, that helps to give it up. But it means giving up thinking that that everything is dependent upon it. It is small. It is small.
So giving up thinking everything is dependent on it goes hand in hand with this kind of acceptance you're talking about.
Yes, exactly.
Imagining like a parent accepting a neighbor's kid or something, or like a guest house, that poem, The Guest House, or that kind of fully accepting, fully, not placating exactly, but providing a safe, comfortable space, I guess. Or embracing, giving, holding space for it, hosting.
Well, it's enlightenment, or let's say the first experience of enlightenment. There's no, obviously, but make a joke here in a second, but there's no lights flashing, okay? It actually, that's the first time that you accept yourself. All of a sudden you realize something that was just comes out, and you understand, oh my goodness. And that, oh my goodness, as it were, changes everything. The whole world flips over by your true acceptance of yourself. But that's a very short experience. And then practice from that point is the naturally, little by little, expansion of that understanding, in which acceptance becomes of others as well, of course, of yourself and others is just as important. So we really have to, a teacher should show acceptance of the student as an example of what acceptance of the self is like. So it's this is more Soto Zen, of course, because in Rinzai, in the beginning anyway, certainly, the point is to see what a big problem the self is right away, and to hit you over the head with the self until you can't take it anymore. Jane, what do you say?
I was just saying Spencer has his hand.
Oh, okay, Spencer.
Hello. I guess I have, in this society today, and I'm always looking at my thoughts, because that's our Zen training, and I'm looking at this font of nonsense in the back of my brain that's the small self that's spitting out garbage all the time, right? And I know I have this controller that says, no, that's garbage. So if there are no strawberries, I say, fine, things as they are, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm finding that a lot of society, if you don't have strawberries, let's say they can't accept that fact. So there's not a dissonance between their behavior and their beliefs. They change reality to suit their beliefs. Is that just doubling down on the self and delusion? It seems like that's where we're at in society, is we've created a whole new realm of delusion that I didn't see in my youth, or maybe it was always there, or maybe it's more prevalent now. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think that is completely true, Spencer, and you explained it very well. And this is a little different than what you were saying, but going back to what we say before, to accept people. Now, once again, this is not like how I would act as a president. We're talking about how I act as one person. Just being. And to accept others, you accept it's a lot larger than foibles now. but let's say they're foibles. We just like we accepted our own foibles, we accept theirs as well. But this doesn't work as a map for how to run the country or the world. That's for sure. But it does work very well for understanding that each of us is equally and absolutely their own world, and all those worlds are very vast if they only knew it. So anyway, I don't know if that doesn't really answer your question, because it's a problem, Spencer. What you said is definitely a problem.
So let me, the other problem I have is just reconciling that my mind is part of their mind. Because philosophically, I accept that. When I sit, I accept that. But when I'm confronted with it, I don't want to accept that. So I have this dissonance to saying, hey, even this delusional thinking, it's all Dharma, right? It's all part of me. But I understand what is so and what's happening right now, and what's this moment and what's not this moment. It just it's this murkiness that confronting absolute acceptance, right? Like, I have resistance toward that. How do you feel about that, Peter?
Well, the mother accepts the child. Let's say mother or parents. The parents actually, accept the child, but at the same time, they don't let the child do everything. But of course, that's in the life of an individual. Once our place in our world is individually, once our place in the world is settled, truly settled, those problems will not exist, I don't think, Spencer. But I cannot say that I have had that experience particularly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so you should ring the bell and say more zazen.
Well, this is an interesting thing. This is an aside. Doesn't really answer that, but our lives, the lives of all of us, all of you on the screen right now, including Jane and myself, but I can't speak for Jane, of course, but for myself anyway. But I will speak for you.
And for me.
Now I got lost in my little pun there. Ask the question again, Spencer, or ask me to prod me again.
See, how can he exist in other people's worlds?
How can I radically accept their world is my world and my world is their world, and we're all part of Buddha Dharma?
Well, you will.
Yeah, I accept
That doesn't mean
philosophically.
that you can tell them when they're wrong either. Yes, Jane.
I was going to say, we're already doing that all the time. We're already seeing ourselves through other people's eyes, and it's not always pleasant. But when we see ourselves in a negative form, most likely we're seeing ourselves through someone else's experience of us. And so I think every day our experience is that way, is that we see ourselves through someone else's eyes. Some days we see ourselves as a hero, and again, that's someone else's eyes. And other days we see ourselves as quite lowly. And again, that's why we don't take our mind seriously, because we are seeing ourselves through someone else's eyes constantly, but we only get lost in that if we pay attention to our thoughts and hang on to them.
I could go with that.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane. Yeah, yes, but let me, there was one more person. Steve raised his hand. You, Steve? Okay, yes, yeah,
Oh,
yes, yeah.
I would just go with the Roman proverb of that those who cannot accept the fates will be dragged kicking and screaming along. So that I think there is an essence for you to, all of us, to take the ride if you can't accept. Because it is, as the Buddha did say, we are punished by our anger, not because of it.
Yeah,
It's the same kind of principle.
Oh, okay,
That's a
sure,
good
sure,
point.
yeah, that's a good point, yeah.
Mike,
But, Rachel,
Mike, and
and then Mike, yep.
Thanks, Peter, for the talk. When there's maybe just a little gasp and release on the grip of the small cell, so there's just maybe a little gap. Is there not also a kind of shock of not even being able to identify with your own self anymore? In other words, that carefully constructed small cell, all of a sudden, not only did one not do it all by oneself, it's almost like it's fragmented and there are so many other people and things. Do you know what I mean? That it was created by so much more that you can actually have a moment where you don't even identify with yourself anymore. I mean, it won't hold, of course, but does that make any sense, Peter?
Yeah, of course, that's, that's, when the second patriarchs, said, I don't know how it went exactly, but something to, I mean, to the effect that he was asked who he was by Bodhidharma, and he said, "I've been practicing so long, I don't really know who I am anymore." That's the same thing, yeah, yeah. We don't, But I let me answer one thing to this this thing that we're talking about right now, is that we all are working together. Even the worst of us is working together, and we all define each other. And that's what has been talking about here. Spencer and you and Jane are talking about that. But it's something that as a bodhisattva, you feel compassion, who is to some extent not completely dealt with all his or her problems, but has done gone quite a ways. Therefore, you understand how they don't understand. And if they're in your own world and there is and they'd like you to help them, then you try to help them. And that's why we do Zazen finally, is to learn our true nature, which is to help others. It's just what we do. Just like we always do the precepts, and the precepts only tell us that we're not doing who we really are. And then who we really are comes in play. You don't need anything else. So the sympathy, the feeling of compassion for others will become stronger and stronger. Chris, is that you? Oh, I'm sorry, a woman,
Yes.
Mike
yes,
was next.
okay.
Mike was next.
Mike is
yeah.
next, okay, Mike?
I've changed my mind. I'll let Chris take over.
No, I gotta have you talk, Chris, I can't go without that.
Mike.
Where'd he go? Mike.
Yeah.
Mike, but he disappeared, didn't he disappear?
Mike,
Oh, there's over
Yeah,
there.
I'm here. No,
Yeah, yes.
we need to hear you.
My statement was on an earlier part of this conversation, so it's kind of not relevant to what we're talking about now. But what I was thinking about when I was listening to your talk was it seems to boil down that the one thing that I find with Zen that's the most difficult thing is reaching a balance between big self, small self, desires, things like this. The small self has a role. The desires we have to accomplish something has a role. But you brought it out that our attachment to having it the way we perceive it to be is where we trip up. And I kept thinking of that line from, I can't remember the exact name of the sutra from, I think it's the Sixth Patriarchs. They say, the way is not difficult as long as you don't choose. And,
Yeah, that's the
and
fourth
that
patriarch.
fourth patriarch. But it was that thing about the big self, the small self and stuff.
Yeah.
The small self has a role, but we can't allow it to take over. We have to control it. We can't deny anything because everything is a part of the Dharma and our existence. So that the biggest problem seems to be, and your talk seemed to show that to me, and I don't know if anybody else saw it this way, was that we have to maintain the middle way in everything we do. And that way we don't get caught up in what society's going crazy about. We don't get caught up in what we're going crazy about and our desires and our wishes and our ego and all this stuff. And if we maintain the middle way, the middle path, that's the best we can do. And that's to kind of cause the least amount of suffering for us as well as the people we encounter. And I don't know if that even relates to what we're talking about anymore, but that's what I was thinking about during your talk.
Who's next?
Yes.
I still want to.
Mitch.
Yeah.
And so this was a thought I had in response to what Spencer asked. So the thought was, there's a quote, a well-known quote from RuPaul.
Okay.
If you can't love yourself, how in the hell are you going to love anyone else?
Yeah.
So I see that a corollary to that is that our ability to love and then to accept others is tied to our ability to love and accept ourselves. To love ourselves, we have to accept ourselves, and that's how we can accept other people as well. And to that end, I think that your strength as teachers is exemplified in part by how totally accepting you are of us as students, and it sets quite a high bar for me to live up to in learning how to accept myself. But I think you made a very good point about Soto teachers.
But what you said is true, Chris, by the way. Yeah, I mean, what RuPaul said is true. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Mitch?
Where is
And then Shane?
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Okay. My take on this is, if you go back to the Heart Sutra and you look at the part that says that the bodhisattvas take refuge in perfect wisdom and live without hindrances to your mind. And without hindrances, we see through delusion and find the nirvana. Well, those hindrances are our tendencies to judge things, stack things up against our own experience, our discrimination, our judgments, our prejudices, our desire to obtain things, all of this. And that's, to me, at least, is the self, the small self. All those things, factors brought together, and they clash with other people's selves. And until we can clear and see ourselves through our zazen of what our hindrances are and what our walls that we create in our minds that limit us, the Buddha said we are by nature compassion and loving kindness. So my practice is getting rid of those filters, trying to be as unconditioned as possible. That's basically what my aim is, to accept the world in an unfiltered way.
Yeah.
And that's, if I don't have any of those judgments, then I can accept other people.
That's right. Yep.
And then without those filters and those judgments and those rules and those metrics, then I don't conflict with as many people in situations. So that's my take on it.
Yeah. Very good point. Jane, your hand's up. They're waiting
Yeah.
in line here.
I wanted to talk about what Peter said was very true about the need of the self to love. And what Chris said also, the need of the self to love is a really big point. But I think if you look at all the desires we have and give them colors, you would say we are wrapped in so many colors we can't really see anything. And as we train ourselves like a parent training a wayward child, because the self is birthed by us, and yet we let ourselves run free and wild as if there is no responsibility touched. So we train ourselves like a good parent to show the self by slowly eliminating all those colors or desires until we're almost transparent. And when we're transparent enough, the real self underneath, the real being, the Buddha nature, can suddenly come up and come through and begin to work with the small self to direct things in the direction we already want. And at that point, the small self will really begin to live for the first time, experiencing love of oneself, experiencing love of the world, experiencing love of everyone we meet. And at that point, we can rest. And we go through great effort up until that point, and from that point we can start to rest on ourselves and know that our direction is clear and open. And so I think at that point we don't have to worry so much as we do when we're all on our own, making way to the best of our ability. But I think once that love is opened, it's like a crack. It breaks open the egg, gets rid of all the desired colors that cloak us. And then when we have an almost transparent nature, that real self can begin to operate, and the real self that we are loves everyone already. We don't have to teach ourselves that. We already have great love and compassion inside, and that's this real nature. And when the small self becomes the ally of the big self, then we can rest in ourselves, rest as we are, and enjoy the ride.
Well, I think that's a pretty good way to end our meeting today.